On November 30th, 2013, the world lost more than just a movie star. It lost a son, a father, a friend, and the quiet soul behind one of the most iconic film franchises of all time. Paul Walker, the heart and humanity of Fast and Furious, was gone. It happened in seconds. A Porsche Carrera GT, fast, rare, and brutally unforgiving, tore down a Santa Clarita road. In the passenger seat, Paul Walker. Behind the wheel, his friend, business partner, and experienced racer Roger Rodas. They weren't drag racing. They weren't filming a scene. They had just stepped out from a charity event meant to raise money for victims of Typhoon Haiyan. It was supposed to be a break, a short ride, a breath of air. Minutes later, the car hit a light pole, then a tree, and burst into flames. Both men died at the scene. For fans, it was impossible to process. Paul wasn't a headline-hungry celebrity. He wasn't reckless or self-destructive. He was calm, grounded, a family man, a gearhead, a good guy, the kind that didn't just play heroes in movies. He quietly tried to be one in real life. The media called it a tragic accident. News anchors replayed the crash site from every angle. But those who truly followed Paul Walker knew something was off. He wasn't even supposed to be at the event that long. He had somewhere else to be. Fast 7 was deep in production. His schedule was packed. He'd been missing sleep. He looked exhausted in the days leading up to the crash. So why was he there? Why that car? Why that moment? This wasn't just a loss. It was a question. And the more people learned about Paul's final days, the pressure he was under, the choices he was quietly weighing, the more it felt like his death wasn't just tragic, it was preventable. This is the untold story of Paul Walker's final ride, the pressure, the burnout, and the man behind the myth. Because while Hollywood gave him fame, it never gave him peace. Paul Walker didn't fit the mold of a Hollywood star, and he never wanted to. Long before Fast and Furious made him a global name, Paul was just a California kid who surfed, rode dirt bikes, and dreamed of marine biology. Not movie sets. He stumbled into acting as a teenager, landing commercial gigs and small roles. But fame, it made him uncomfortable. Cameras felt intrusive. Paparazzi felt parasitic. "I'm not a celebrity," he once said. "I just have a job that puts me in the spotlight." When The Fast and the Furious exploded in 2001, everything changed. Practically overnight, Paul Walker became a household name. With his laid-back charm and real-life passion for cars, he wasn't just acting. He was Brian O'Connor, and fans loved him for it. But with success came suffocating demands. Sequel after sequel pulled him deeper into the machine. Press tours, red carpets, global premieres. He couldn't go surfing without a camera following him. Couldn't eat with his daughter without fan selfies interrupting. Paul never chased celebrity. He ran from it. Off camera, he was the opposite of Hollywood flash. He drove his own cars, answered his own phone, and found refuge in places that didn't care about box office numbers, mountains, oceans, and the racetrack. That dual life, global superstar on screen, private soul off it, created an emotional tug-of-war. The more famous he became, the more invisible the real Paul felt. By 2013, the pull was stronger than ever. He was filming Fast 7, parenting full-time for the first time, and managing his growing charity. Publicly, he smiled. Privately, he was stretched to the edge. And the pressure was mounting. To understand the man Paul Walker was becoming before he died, you have to understand the most important role he ever took on: father. In 2011, Paul gained full custody of his daughter, Meadow. She moved in with him full-time, and everything changed. Suddenly, the actor who once said he'd give up Hollywood for nature was contemplating doing it for something even more meaningful: family. Paul doted on Meadow. He left sets early to catch her school events. He cooked for her. They traveled together, surfed together, and made up for lost time. She was his grounding force. "My daughter is the best thing that's ever happened to me," he once said. But being a full-time father while carrying the Fast and Furious franchise wasn't easy. While filming Fast 7, Paul was constantly shuttling between sets, meetings, and personal commitments. The production schedule was one of the most brutal in franchise history, with complex stunt work, international locations, and pressure to outdo the billion-dollar success of Fast 6. At the same time, he was pouring energy into Reach Out Worldwide, his disaster relief nonprofit. He wasn't just a figurehead, he was hands-on. He coordinated shipments, traveled to disaster zones, and built the charity into a real force for good. To the public, Paul Walker was living the dream. But in reality, he was chasing sleep. Friends said he looked tired, distracted. Some whispered that he was considering stepping back, maybe even taking a break from acting entirely. He missed the ocean. He missed his daughter. He missed himself. And that's what makes what happened next feel even more tragic. It started as a simple event, a charity car show hosted by Paul's own foundation, Reach Out Worldwide, on a quiet Saturday afternoon in Santa Clarita. November 30th, 2013. Paul showed up around noon. He wasn't supposed to stay long. He was in the middle of Fast 7 production and had obligations the next day. But the event was personal, raising money for typhoon victims in the Philippines. He mingled with fans, took photos, smiled, laughed. Those who saw him said he seemed different. Warm but distant, calm but somewhere else. Then came the Porsche, a red 2005 Porsche Carrera GT, owned by his friend and business partner Roger Rodas, a car known for its speed and its difficulty. No traction control, mid-engine, over 600 horsepower. Even professionals approached it with caution. At 3:30 p.m., Paul and Roger got into the car. They were going for a short drive just to test it out, according to witnesses. No one expected them to be gone longer than 10 minutes. But just 1 mile from the event, everything went wrong. The car veered off the road, slammed into a light pole, then a tree. It exploded on impact. When firefighters arrived, it was already too late. Both men were declared dead at the scene. Paul Walker was 40 years old. The shock was immediate, but the questions came later. The official story was swift. By Sunday morning, headlines around the world declared the cause of death: speed. Investigators stated that the Porsche Carrera GT had been traveling between 80 and 93 miles per hour in a 45 zone when it lost control. It struck a light pole, then a tree, and erupted in flames. Paul Walker died of traumatic and thermal injuries. Roger Rodas died instantly from blunt force trauma. It was ruled an accident, but for many, that wasn't enough. The Porsche Carrera GT had a reputation, a notoriously dangerous supercar, even for professionals. No traction control, unforgiving handling, and it was nearly a decade old, with tires reportedly past their safe usage date. Roger was a trained racer. Paul was a lifelong gearhead. Something didn't add up. In the months that followed, questions mounted. Why did a charity event end in such tragedy? Why was the car even on the road that day? Was it mechanical failure? Human error? Or something deeper, something the headlines wouldn't print? Paul's daughter, Meadow, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Porsche, alleging that the car's design was unsafe and lacked essential crash protection features. Porsche's defense: the car was misused. Meadow ultimately reached a confidential settlement in 2017. But still, no explanation filled the void. Friends said Paul had seemed distant in the days before, tired, quiet, like his mind was somewhere else. Was that ride a break, a distraction, a cry for normalcy? The crash may have been mechanical, but the silence that followed? That was emotional. Because what the autopsy couldn't explain was why a man who had everything was still running from something. By late 2013, Paul Walker was standing at a crossroads. He was finishing one of the biggest films of his life, raising a teenage daughter, running a growing charity, and managing a collection of over 30 rare performance cars. From the outside, it looked like he had it all. But from the inside, it was clear something was cracking. Sources close to Paul said he was quietly planning to take a break after Fast 7. He'd confided in friends about stepping back from Hollywood, not quitting, just slowing down, spending more time with Meadow, spending more time surfing, living, not performing. He wasn't sleeping much, he wasn't eating right. The pressure of Fast 7, already behind schedule, already over budget, was weighing on him. And with the added responsibility of being a father full-time, Paul's world was being pulled in opposite directions. He didn't complain publicly. He didn't seek pity. That wasn't his style. But the cracks showed. In interviews, his eyes looked tired. His answers were shorter. His appearances at car events grew less frequent. He smiled, but it didn't always reach his eyes. And then there was the loneliness of fame, the kind no one talks about. He was beloved around the world, but few people knew him. Paul once said, "I'm just a dude who likes cars and being a dad. Everything else is noise." In the end, that noise was all around him. And maybe that's what the Porsche represented. 10 minutes of silence, 10 minutes of clarity, a familiar wheel, a friend in the driver's seat, and the road ahead. So why did Paul Walker, exhausted, overwhelmed, and scheduled for reshoots, climb into that car? It's a question that still haunts fans and those who knew him best. That Saturday wasn't a press event. It wasn't a film shoot. It was his, a charity event for Reach Out Worldwide. Paul wasn't there to promote a movie. He was there because he believed in what he built. Disaster response, hands-on help, not cameras, not autographs. After greeting fans and signing items, Roger Rodas suggested they take a quick drive in the Carrera GT, a test run to check its performance after a tune-up. Paul agreed. They told people they'd be back in 5 minutes. They never returned. The moment they left the parking lot, Paul left the public eye for the last time. No cameras followed, no studio handlers, just Paul, just Roger, just the road. And in a way, it was poetic. For a man who spent his life being watched, judged, and followed, his final moments were private, intimate, human. But the ride wasn't supposed to end that way. The silence that followed the crash wasn't just shock. It was grief, amplified by disbelief. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't suicide. It was one quiet ride with a friend, taken on a day that meant something to him, at a moment when he needed peace. And that's what makes it hurt more. Because Paul Walker didn't die chasing fame. He died trying to outrun the noise. The day after the crash, The sidewalk where the Porsche burned was covered in flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Car clubs drove in from across California. Fans flew in from other states. Hundreds gathered in silence, some revving engines in tribute, others just crying behind sunglasses. Paul Walker wasn't just a movie star, he was ours. He was the rare celebrity who felt real, who didn't fake humility or hide behind a brand. He was the guy who would talk cars for hours, who remembered names, who gave without cameras rolling. The loss cut deep. It wasn't like losing an actor. It was like losing a friend you'd never met. Across the globe, tributes poured in. The cast of Fast and Furious was devastated. Vin Diesel called him "my brother" and made an emotional visit to the crash site, speaking to fans as if addressing family. Tyrese Gibson broke down sobbing in front of Paul's memorial, unable to speak. Ludacris posted, "Your humble spirit was felt from the start." But one person's grief stood apart. Meadow Walker, Paul's daughter. Only 15 at the time, she had just begun living full-time with her dad. And just as she was reconnecting with the most important person in her life, he was gone. Her silence was heartbreaking. Her strength unimaginable. In the weeks after, the studio paused filming Fast 7. For a moment, Hollywood stopped. And in that stillness, Paul Walker became more than a name in the credits. He became a symbol of the cost of pressure, of the pain behind the spotlight, of the fragility behind the fame. The world mourned the star, but those who really knew him mourned the man who never wanted to be one. Paul Walker's legacy didn't end with Fast and Furious. In fact, it began long before the first film. It lived in the way he gave without posting about it, in the way he pushed himself to help, not for attention, but for impact. Reach Out, worldwide, the disaster relief charity Paul founded, has continued its mission. Under the stewardship of Meadow and a dedicated team, the organization has helped people in over a dozen countries recover from natural disasters, just like Paul intended. But his legacy extends far beyond charity work. Car culture, especially, still feels his absence. Paul wasn't just another actor who liked cars, he lived them. He had a passion for JDM imports, American muscle, and exotic European builds. His personal garage was a dream lineup of Supras, GTRs, Skylines, and classic BMWs. Not investments, loves. He was one of us. In every tuner garage, every streetcar meet, every fan who fell in love with cars because of Fast and Furious, Paul's influence lingers. Every wide-body kit, every clean engine bay, every midnight cruise echoes the man who turned ride or die into a mantra. And in Hollywood, he changed the way leading men were seen. He wasn't a megastar chasing awards. He was a humble human being who loved what he did and walked away from the spotlight whenever he could. He proved that you could be famous without being fake, that you could make it big and still stay grounded. And that kind of legacy, it lasts longer than film reels. There's a scene at the end of Furious 7, the now iconic goodbye between Dominic Toretto and Brian O'Connor. Vin Diesel looks at Paul's character, then the screen fades into a final drive down separate roads. No words, just the sun, the sea, and a sense of peace. What most fans didn't know at the time was that the emotion in that scene was real. The cast wasn't acting, they were grieving. And the goodbye? It wasn't scripted, it was felt. For Paul. Those two words became a promise, a dedication, a reminder that some losses are too big for cinema and too personal for sound bites. Paul Walker didn't die as a superstar. He died as a father, a friend, a giver. and a guy who just wanted to live life his way. His final days weren't spent partying. They were spent giving. His final act wasn't in a scene, it was in a garage full of hope. And his final ride wasn't a stunt. It was a moment of clarity that fate tragically turned into goodbye. He didn't burn out because he was reckless. He faded away because he was human, and the world never let him slow down. So remember him not just for the cars or the films, but for the man behind the wheel. A good soul, gone too soon, but never forgotten.